sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
Am I the only one who thinks this is totally insane? Rob, we're fighting theological injustice here.
They're not using just weights and measures.
He said we have 50 listeners. I think he's being generous.
Read your Bible as interpreted by experts.
Rob, are you as shocked as I am?
It's nonsense. If you've given any money to this, you need to complain. You ask for your money back.
I don't know about you, but I find this annoying. What up, and shalom? Welcome to the Rob and Caleb Show, the show where theology matters, scholarship counts, and theology matters. My name is Caleb Hegg. With me, of course, Rob Van Hoff. What up, Rob? How's it going, brother?
Bruchim habayim.
Bruchim habayim. Yes.
Welcome all, one and all.
One and all, yes.
I'm doing well. It's snowing again here in Spokane, and they say we might get another 3 to 5 inches like tonight.
Ooh-wee.
You know, it's really pretty. The sun comes out occasionally, and we get the nice, beautiful uplift of vitamin D. I really dig that. But, boy, shoveling snow. I already broke one snow shovel this winter. So, and I was shoveling with a metal, we had ice, and so I'm out there going, and I got to the edge of the concrete, and I went, and I'm like, oh, crud, that was a sprinkler head.
Oh, no.
So I broke a sprinkler head that I can't even really investigate till spring. So anyway, it's just, first world problems. No worries.
Yep, that's right. Well, it snowed here about, 2 inches a couple days ago. And the news, my radio station I listen to all the time is news. It was like 24-hour coverage of the storm. It wasn't even a storm. It was like a light sprinkling. And, the news is freaking out. It's pretty funny, actually. So we're starting at 9:30, and I think this will probably be a theme for us for the next couple of weeks until the Lord gives Rob a new car. And so
the car that I would normally be driving, well, the heater core went out, and it's like to get to it, Ford made what year is it? A mid-90s Taurus. And to get to the heater core, which is because it leaks when you put fluid in, you have to take all the dashboard out and all this stuff just to get to this little part. So anyway, it's piled in snow right now anyway. So even if it ran, there's snow. Plus the plow, the city plow has gone by a couple times, so that car is not going anywhere till spring.
All right, on.
Enough about my woes.
Yes, exactly.
Woes. I have the joy of the Lord. Joy of the Lord is my strength.
Yeah, how's it been, man? Past week, I got to say, I've been rather discouraged with some of the. We've been so busy at Torah Resource trying to get different things switched over. We finally got the Torah Resource radio site switched over to the regular Torah Resource site. We made a bunch of landing pages. We got the library pretty much up and running, even though there's stuff that needs to be added, and there will be stuff added continually. And the next big project now is to take all of our videos and put them in the teachings too. So that's part of the library. And
very cool.
We just got so much going on. I feel, I was telling Rob earlier, I feel very unprepared for this show. Luckily, it tends to happen that when I have a week, yes, when I have a week where I'm not prepared, Rob, it's like the 1 week a year that Rob prepares.
This is the 1 week of the year.
So I got confirmation from my father that if we would like to have Brant Petrie on, if he will agree to come on for our Passover special this year, we can have him on and get his perspective on the different chronologies of the Passover Seder. Now, I'm almost finished with his book. I've been reading it now for months. In my defense, I haven't been reading it straight through. I've been reading, a little bit here, 10 pages here, and then I'll put it down and I'll read something else. So I got like 5 books going all at the same time. His book is 517 pages long, so I mean it's not a small little book, but It's been interesting. There's some things that I certainly disagree with heavily, obviously, because he's a Roman Catholic. Anyway, all right.
Well, you're right. You're looking at the same. Here's a good way to think of this: is that this is how we interact with the larger world of biblical scholarship. Is why we value going to, the conferences and things like that. Is because the data is there. The data is there, but the frame of reference, our frames are different. So, in other words, the same data in Dr. Petrie's worldview it can be the same data, Caleb, that you're looking at for your thesis, but your hashkafa, no, your frame, the frame that you're using is different, and so you're going to interpret that data differently. And what's so wonderful about a place where we have ideally free speech, and we set up these kind of conferences where people who are coming to the same data with different frames can try to civilly argue why our frame is more profitable than your frame, for example. So learning to do that is another skill set, though, right? We don't, just like with any skill, it takes time, and you have to stick with it.
It's the pink glasses to the green glasses. We're looking at this.
Just a head note. I posted for those who are listening through the chat room, I posted the link, and if you haven't already, that Caleb put up this morning for today's the handout. It's a 5-pager. So once we get to this topic, we won't get there for a while. I think Caleb has some other things that we're going to talk about first, but you might now get it and even print it out, because we're going to spend some time on that.
Yeah, and it's in your show notes. Those of you who get show notes, I've noticed that we have 97 people getting show notes now. Can you believe this? We're coming up on 950 subscribers on our YouTube channel. That blows my mind. Anyway,
after today, maybe some of those guys will leave. Who knows? We'll see.
Anyway, if you are looking for it, you can also, if you're watching this later on YouTube, or you're listening on iTunes or something like that, then you can go to our Facebook page, which is what? Facebook.com/The Rob and Caleb Show, or is it just Rob and Caleb Show? I suppose I should know this. You can also go to Torah Resource and find the under the radio tab, go down to Rob and Caleb. I'll post it there. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I should know this. These are things that I should know. It is Facebook.com/Rob and Caleb Show. There you go. All right, everybody. Well, let's get to it then. I don't know. We haven't played many sound effects recently, which is fine. I always think it's fun to do that, though. Maybe at some point today we'll get around to it. But let's not dilly-dally, okay? Let's get on to more important things. Okay, so, by the way, somebody asked the question. I don't know if you saw this. This is in reference to our segment last week on Titus. They said, can you give the reference to the church father you mentioned teaching that Titus eventually got circumcised?
Oh, yeah. I don't have it. I can find it. I'll probably need
next week, maybe. Yeah, next week. Yeah. Not a problem. Okay, so then let's move on. John Piper. Rob found this, or somebody sent this to us. I'm sorry. Somebody sent this to us. This teaching was presented on October 6th.
One of our friends up north in the Great White North sent it.
That's right. October 6th, 1985.
That's how long ago that was?
Yeah, I
thought his voice sounded a little youthful.
Yeah.
compared to
that's why I found the date. Is I was like, dude, how old is he here?
It's like, this guy's a young preacher. So to be fair, I'm glad you chased that little nugget down for us, Caleb, because that does give us some.
However, this is an argument that I've heard a lot of times. And we'll listen to it real quick. So I was 4 years old when he preached this. He's preaching now on Exodus 21, that is 20, verse 1 through 11. Let's go there real quick. Exodus 20, verses 1 through 11. Now, he's already read this and had somebody read it for him. This is what one of his conclusions is. This is only 34 seconds long. I'm sure those of us who have been in the Messianic and Hebrew Roots world for any amount of time, talking to our Christian brothers and sisters in the Lord, I'm sure that we probably have heard this same kind of argument. It's this, unfortunately, I love Piper, but it's discouraging his views of certain parts of the Torah, the Sabbath being one of them.
Make it one day out of 7. Verse 6. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Work 6, rest 1. Work 6, rest 1. That's the biblical pattern laid down in the Ten Commandments. It doesn't seem to be of the essence here whether it happens to be Sunday or Saturday. The point is, work 6, take a day off. Work 6, take a day off.
Okay, so obviously he says that it doesn't matter what day you take off as long as you're taking a Sabbath. Do you want to start on this? The Christian idea, many Christians say, well, I take a Sabbath, I tend to work weekends, so I usually take Monday off as my Sabbath. Or some people, one of the main things that a lot of Christians will say is, well, I keep a Sabbath, it's Sunday, and God doesn't really care what day it is, as long as it's a day, right? And that's what Piper's saying here.
I do have something I want to point out from Scripture, but first, this marks Piper off from example, the Lutheran tradition, which teaches that the Sabbath is, the 7th day is still what we call, Saturday, more or less, but that Lutherans don't observe it out of Christian liberty, right? So they observe the first day. It's the Catholic tradition, is it not, that says, no, the Sabbath is now Sunday and we changed it. He's not taking either of those positions. He's taking a position that says it just is you work 6 days and then you rest the 7th. And the problem here is that it's not our Sabbath. It's God, right? I mean, God, when he gives it, with the manna back in Exodus in the wilderness, there was a day, it wasn't any, work 6 days and on the, whatever 6 days you want, and then the 6th day, there will be a double portion for you. No. And the guy who was stoned for picking up wood on the Shabbat, obviously, but if he might not want to go to quote Old Testament scriptures, but I would ask, why would Yeshua in Matthew say, pray that your flight will not be on the Sabbath? And not only that, it's got the definite article everywhere. The Sabbath, the Sabbath. Isaiah 58, if you, call the Sabbath a delight and do not do your own fancies on my holy day, right? Whose day is it? So the Sabbath is defined by God, and it's not movable, right? It's
I want to go to Exodus 31, 31:13. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, you shall surely observe my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. Therefore, you are to observe the Sabbath, for it is holy. For it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. For whoever does any work on it, that person shall be cut off from among his people. For 6 days work may be done, but on the 7th day there is a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall surely be put to death." Okay, now, the first thing that we need to I'll keep going here in a second because there's more. The first thing we need to realize is that if everybody gets to choose what day is their Sabbath, then how are you going to hold anybody accountable? How can someone die? You see somebody picking up sticks on Saturday, you say, "Oh, look, that guy's he's working on the Shabbat.
And he's like, time out.
Let's stone him."
This is my 5th day.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, excuse me. I take Monday as the Sabbath? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, never mind. There, keep going. No, obviously not, right? There has to be some kind of a standard. And so anyway.
Plus, it's a group of it's people together. You shall keep my Sabbaths. Y'all shall keep my Sabbaths. So that first of all, they're his, and he's taking a group of people. So that means all the people must be in agreement as to when it is. So yeah.
I'm getting a static click from you, man. Like jiggle your cord a little or something. Okay,
Check.
I want to keep going. 31:16. So the sons of Israel shall observe the Sabbath to celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the sons of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth. But on the seventh day he ceased from labor and was refreshed. In other words, it was a very specific day. It wasn't, God, didn't shift. The first 6 days he worked, and the seventh day, and this is what we're celebrating. So, I mean, I would ask, is the 4th of July, can we just choose any day in July that we want to celebrate it? No, of course not. The idea that that every other holiday is set, and every holiday and every birthdays are always set. It's always the same day of the week. But when it comes to the Sabbath, the one that is like one of the most important days to celebrate, that we're supposed to celebrate forever, it can shift. What other day does that? What other celebration does that? Where you can say, oh well, I guess you missed it here. Put it 3 days later, it's okay. Or I like celebrating it 4 days before everyone else. No, it doesn't work like that. Well, I suppose it does in the Hebrew roots and the Messianic movement, right? Because everybody's got a different calendar anyway. The only time that we see this happening in Scripture, though, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only time we see it happening in Scripture is for the Passover. If you miss the Passover the first time because you're on a long journey, you can do it a month later, right? See, but even then, you can't do it 3 days later. You can't do it 5 days later. You can't do it 15 days later. It's specific. God is not random. God is very specific in what he does, and he's very specific in his Torah, and he's very specific with the Shabbat, with the Sabbath. So although I greatly respect Dr. Piper and the work that he's done for the kingdom and the immense work he's done to build up the body and continues to do to build up the body, I have to strongly disagree with him on this. I think that exegetically, I think that his idea, at least in 1985, was extremely flawed. Now, who knows what he would say today in terms of the Sabbath? I do know that Dr. Piper does try to keep the Sabbath. He does that on Sunday. And I think that he does that by trying not to work. I don't believe he spends money. So he's trying to keep a Sabbath, although he's got the wrong day. Anyway, I hope that helps some people out there. Anything else you want to say on that, Rob?
Nope. Good job.
Hey, I'm getting a crackle, man, every time you talk.
Even right now?
Yep.
Okay, what should I do? I don't know what to do.
Are people in the chat room getting a... Okay, hang on, everybody. Hang on. Let's try to get our technical difficulties done here. Is anybody in the chat room hearing the crackle? Yes, I hear it. Should we have you log out and log back in?
Yeah, go ahead and...
Why don't you call me... All right, so we're back and we're good to go. Okay, let's get into it. So I think everyone on the internet by now knows that last week I misquoted something, and I apologize. I said that it was Isaiah 7. It's not. I had a question about that.
No, Caleb.
Yeah, I know.
You do not receive correction well.
I know. Well,
it actually is Isaiah 7.
No, it's not.
Those people don't. I'm kidding.
Okay, so let's read. John put probably the most concise email together. However, we got several of them. There was about 5 people that emailed and said, no, you got the passage wrong. You all were right. I kind of had a feeling that it wasn't that passage because anyway. So this is what John says. John says the final mem topic is from Isaiah 9:6-7. Now, I brought this up to try to show that the rabbi who wrote the article. Let me catch everybody up. There was a rabbi who wrote an article that was put on Aish.com, and the article was titled "Why Jews Don't Believe in Jesus," which the title, from the very beginning, he's wrong. Plenty of Jews believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Not the point. So within this, he was trying to show that Christians misinterpret scriptures in order to get Yeshua to be the Messiah. And one of the places that brings up is Isaiah 7, where it says that a sign will be given, a virgin will give birth, and he says, no, the word isn't virgin there. It's the word for young maiden. Nowhere did anybody think that a virgin was going to give birth to the Messiah. Well, first of all, we know that's not true because the Septuagint, which was written about 300 years before Yeshua came, used the word virgin, not young maiden. So obviously somebody thought,
And those were Jewish priests.
yeah,
translating.
exactly. And
Educated Jews.
so right there we know he's off. Second of all, there's plenty of rabbinical evidence, rabbis saying that the Messiah would be born to a virgin. And the reason why is because of the closed mem. And I tried to bring this up. Once again, I apologize. I gave you the wrong reference. It wasn't in Isaiah 7. However, the point still stands. Let's read what John has to say. He says, the final mem topic is from Isaiah 9, 6 through 7, in connection with the Pele Yoetz El Gibor Avi Ad Sar Shalom Lemor Bey of the increase. In verse 7 contains the final mem. He's correct on this. But I wonder, why would this be significant for Messianics? Good question, considering that the interpretation of it stems from the traditional view that the letters have meaning. That's not exactly true. Are you?
No, well, I understand what he's. I understand.
I understand what he's saying too, but he says, "Are you in a compromise with the word picture movement? Since it is that the word picture movement has gleaned its fundamental ideas from these rabbinic Kabbalistic concepts." No, I'm not, and I'll explain that in a second. I mean not to be argumentative, but for others that may wonder, I am hoping for a deeper explanation of your acceptance of the Mem Sophit having a meaning that correlates with a philosophy belief system you refute regularly.
Here's
Wait, hey, no.
Okay, you go first.
First of all, let's say, John, very, very well put email. This is very good.
I almost want to grab a guitar and break into song.
No, let's not. Okay, so no. Put. I should get a harmonica. We can play music together. Here's what I would say: is that I personally don't think that the closed mem in Isaiah 9:7 means that the Messiah would be born of a virgin. I personally don't believe that. But my point is that if a rabbi who does not believe that Yeshua is the Messiah says the Jews have never believed that the Messiah would be born of a virgin, yes, they do. The rabbis say it constantly, and they say it about this verse. I personally don't accept that. I think that one of two things is happening, and Rob has actually enlightened me. Before this past week, I thought that it was a scribal error. Wow, you're crackling again, man. Bad.
Really?
Really bad.
Okay, I'm going to shift to my headset. I know you're not going to like it, but I think let's just see. Keep talking.
Okay.
Keep talking.
So the point is that it when it comes to okay, so one of two things is happening here. Originally I thought it was probably a shift or a scribal error. Okay, is originally what I thought. Scribal error. And no, we shouldn't read into it. However, the point still stands. If a Jewish person tries to say to you, oh, the rabbis would never say that the Messiah was born of a virgin. Yes, they would. They say it about Isaiah 9:7. That's the point. Whether or not they're right or not about the closed mem has no bearing on it. The point is that they do say that the Messiah would be born of a virgin. So this rabbi who's sitting here saying, oh, no, Jews have never believed that the Messiah would be born of a virgin, nonsense. That's not true. Now, of course, this past week, Rob has explained to me that no, what probably ended up happening is that you had one word, okay, that was connected, and it got broken into two words, and that's why you have this mem on the end of a word instead of in the middle of a word. Say something.
So, I didn't hear because I was out for a sec.
Yeah, so basically, I'll give everybody a quick recap.
No.
Basically, what I was saying is that you were telling me that it's probably two words that or one word that has been moved into two. Go for it now. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Well, I wanted to say first, also thanks to the awesome question by John, because it shows it's a pointed question.
Yeah.
Right? It's a pointed question that
reflects
knowledge of the issues, as well as someone who's been tracking our discussion. Mm-hmm. So it's a meeting of someone who's been a close listener, attentive to detail, and is also knowledgeable about the topic, putting those together and formulating a concise, pointed question. That's such a valuable thing for us in terms of a skill set of asking good questions, because that's what moves the conversation forward. So That's why I wanted to get the song going there for the good question. One point, I understand why John is associating it with the Hebrew word picture movement and their interpretive fantasy kind of thing. Just to clarify, there in the Paleo Hebrew there would not be a difference between a mem, a mem sophit, or a mem that's in the middle of a word, right? So the word picture is not technically what we're talking about, but we are talking about in the scribal tradition the oddity of a mem sophit in the middle of a word when the general scribal rule is that it's only used at the end of a word. So, but still, so this was a good opportunity to also address another question, because someone had emailed us recently saying, hey, and I think it was part of the impetus for last week, saying you guys talk a lot about Christian theology. You don't engage with Jewish sources very much. You don't talk about rabbinics very much. And so this was a great opportunity to even go deeper into that. And so there's a handout that's 5 pages long that I compiled that I thought that we would just go over and talk through. So if you don't have it and you're listening, you might, if this is a recording, you're listening, pause and download that. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to follow along.
Yeah, and I'm going to put this right now. I will put it on the Rob and Caleb Show page on Torah Resource. So if you want to, if you're listening to this later, if you're listening to a recorded version of this, great. Go to TorahResource.com and then hover over radio and go down to the Rob and Caleb Show page.
I just saw Peter's comment. Maybe the muted is a closed man. I love it. That's awesome. Okay, here we go. So basically there's 5 pages here. My creative title, I have the 2 Hebrew, Lemarbe, Lam Rabbe, what is it? There's a space there. Isaiah 9:6 among the scribes and rabbis. There's basically, I think, I'm just scrolling through it here on my screen. There's 4 sections. Section 1 is manuscripts. What are our oldest manuscripts? Forget printed editions. We want to go before the printing press, right? We want to go to our oldest examples of Jewish scribes writing out this passage. And so we have that from Qumran. So that's Second Temple period. Then we have a cluster from the Middle Ages that we'll look at. That's section 1. Section 2 then, so that's page 1 and 2. So page 3 starts section 2, which is what we call early rabbinic era or the late antiquity. So Isaiah 9:6 in Talmud and Midrash. So this is looking generally at the Jerusalem Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, and various midrashim that are from basically after the destruction of the temple up to the rise of Islam, and maybe a little into, just think like the year 100 to 1000 roughly. That's section 2 that we'll look at. Then we're going to look, section 3 is page 4. That's medieval Parshanim. So this is rabbis from Europe, like we have France, Spain, Provençal, which is southern France. The earliest rabbinic commentators that are talking about this passage from Isaiah. We're going to look at them. What are they saying? And then part 4, and I don't know if we'll get this far this week. I hope we do, but there's a lot to talk about, is then from then what we call, late medieval to early modern era in the Kabbalistic writings. So that's the overview. So basically we have the 4 sections. The newest source that we're going to look at is Yeshayahu Horovitz, who is the Shelah, Shnei Luchot Habrit, he is his name, he lived in Prague in the 16th century. So he's the newest person we're going to look at, because from there on out, everything forward is just going to be regurgitations of these sources, maybe with an occasional new gematria or something. So that's what this outline is. Normally, this is basically what you see here would be a presentation, kind of a handout for a presentation I might give, like at an SBL or at a conference. Basically, you'd get a handout. This is the kind of thing, or that if I didn't hand it all out, maybe the images that you see would be on a projector, and then maybe there would be just a handout that is a front and a back with some of the text typed out, but where the images would be on the screen. So this is kind of a different Rob and Caleb show, Caleb, because we've never really done this kind of thing. But like Caleb was saying, this is like the 1 week of the year where I did more of the intense prep, and
you
Caleb
can tell his prep is so much better than mine. He's got a handout with like it's all studied out and everything.
But this is an important question, and without John's question, it wouldn't occur to me to put all this together. You know what I mean? It's
sure.
It's like, it's so the question spurs us on to produce things like this, that my hope and prayer is going to be helpful for all of you listening, and you print this out and share it with others. But basically, so that's the overview of what we're looking at.
By the way, right now you can go to that page on Torah Resource, and it's under Rob's handout for show 160. Click here to download. Okay, keep going.
Excellent. Okay, so the part 1. So this is the first 2 pages, manuscripts. So remember, we're not looking at printed editions. If you go to your printed Mikraot Gedolot, like Rabbinic Bible, you'll see the closed mem. If you look at any, you go to a Koran printed Nach or Tanakh, and you look up Isaiah, you'll see so we're going before printed editions. Remember, the printers, when the printing press came around, what did they do? They didn't invent new text. They go and found the best manuscripts they could, and then they do the typesetting, right? They have to typeset all this, and then they print and mass produce the prints. So we're going prior to the printing press, because we want to minimize noise that can come into a text tradition by means of the printers, right? If the printers put a resh, and this happens in rabbinic, if you look at a printed Mikraot Gedolot, for example, Mikraot Gedolot is a rabbinic Bible printed in the 16th century. Sometimes where the letter's supposed to be a dalet, they put a resh there. They typeset a resh instead of a dalet, right? And so you have to go, okay, that's wrong. Obviously they spelled the word wrong, and you have to, so there's errors that can creep in at the printing level that we want to just eliminate. And so we eliminate that. It doesn't, because scribes make errors too. So that's evident. But we're just taking out the middleman in a way. So the earliest is called 1Q Isaiah A. 1 means cave 1 of Qumran. The Q means Qumran. Isaiah means, or ISA is for Isaiah, and then the A, that's supposed normally a little subscript or superscript A, because there's more than one Isaiah fragment here. But this is from Isaiah, from this passage, and you see if we read, my keeps zooming out. I got to zoom back in here, my PDF here. Reading from right to left then. And so this is, if you're not used to Qumran script, this is a good example for you to kind of see. Not all Qumran script is equal. There are multiple scribes. Ada Yardani's the scholar to look at that if you want to investigate the various scripts at Qumran. It's Ada Yardeni. She's at, I believe, Hebrew University, Ada Yardeni. But anyway, the first word here is shechmo, his shoulder. So we're going to start from yikare. So now there's no vowel points, notice. Yikare or yikra. If it's yikra, it would be he will call, but it's probably in nifal. Yikare. It could be yikare. Vowels would make a difference. He will be called, or his name. Yikare shemo. His name will be called. And then we have the word Pele. See, the lameds are nice and tall above the line there. Pele, Yoetz, El Gibor. Now notice this. Look at El Gibor. Would you say that's one word or two? Caleb, what do you think?
Hang
Are
on,
you looking at that?
let me get back to it. Hang on, I apologize.
That's okay. So basically,
I can see why it would be. So you're on the top image, right?
Yeah. El Gibor's in the middle. You have Aleph, a Lamed, and then a Gimel.
Yeah.
Bet, Vav, Resh.
Yeah,
El Gibor. It looks, if just from an eye, I would say those two words are closer together than, for example, Pele and Yoetz.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we have Aviad. Now notice Aviad. That's clearly
two words.
2 words.
Yeah.
And then we have Sar HaShalom. There's a hey, that's a hey. I know it doesn't look like a hey. It looks like a Greek pie or something, but that's a hey in Qumran script. Sar HaShalom. We're going to see that that's different than our Masoretic tradition. It just has Sar Shalom with no hey, no definite article. And then at the very end, it says Le Marbe. Now, what's strange here is that you could almost look, now if you're not used to the Qumran script, it's not super easy, but I zoomed in. I did kind of a zoom of that, and that's the box below. It's a lamed mem petucha, so it's an open mem, and then you see a resh, bet, and then a hey, lem marbe. Now, even though there is a little bit of a space between the mem and the resh, I don't think he means that as 2 words. I think he means this as 1 word. It would be strange for him, especially when you see the shalom, the word ha-shalom right before it. That's a clear final mem, and it's he gives nice space before the next letter, before the next word, lemarbe. In any event, that's the word we're looking at. If you continue on to
and wait. Let's just clarify for those who might be watching later. And once again, if you don't have this handout, you can download it on the Rob and Caleb Show page on Torah Resource. The point is the word that he is talking about now, for those who don't speak Hebrew, is the word that you have a word that the red line is now pointing at, or the red arrow is pointing at. Right below it, he's blown it up so that you can see what he's talking about. He's saying that these what looks like it could be 2 words. It could also be interpreted as 1 word. And what Rob is saying is that this piece that's blown up is 1 word here. Correct?
Yeah, it's clearly, in my opinion, it's 1 word. The space isn't big enough to justify it being called 2 words. Although you could argue there does seem to be a bit of a space there, particularly how close the lamed and the mem are, the lema at the beginning are. But then if we continue in the next line, then it's hamisra, that's the government, ule shalom, and the shalom, ein kates, there is no end. So this is that famous passage. But the word in question is the one in the upper left, le marbe. But what we see here, this is our oldest Jewish scribal text fragment of Isaiah 9, and obviously it's not a mem sophit. We can see the mem sophit of his writing style right below it, or right next to it with the word hashalom, and it's not one of those. And you can see clearly there's no ink there. It's clearly an open mem.
So basically, I want to break it down once again for people who might not know Hebrew. So what you're saying is explain a mem real quick. You have a mem and you have a mem sophit. The mem sophit only comes at the end of a word. So it's like
right.
It's like if the letter actually changes if it's at the end of a word. If it's the last letter of a word. Okay. There's
a few letters that do that. Okay, now this is one
thing
that
hang on. Let's explain just a little bit more because people might not have heard last week's show either. The mem, which is a letter in the Hebrew alphabet, the mem that's that's not at the end of the word, that's not a mem sophit, has an open space in it. Okay,
right.
But the mem sophit does not. It's closed. Okay. And
right.
So what Rob is saying here in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is the earliest manuscript that we have of this passage, is that it's clearly a mem sophit here in this passage, and it should be. Is that correct? It's not at the end. It's at the end of a word.
No. Well, wait a minute. The one in Hashalom is a mem sophit.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, if we just look at this line and you scan this line, you go all the way back to the right, we have the word his shoulders, shin, kaf, mem, vav, and you can see what his regular mem looks like in the word shechem there, shoulder. And then we see it in Yikarei Shamo, shin, mem, vav. So we see another mem there. So we have 2 mems already, your standard mems, in this line. And then we see it again in lemarbe in that last word. And then we have 1 mem sophit on this line in the word hashalom. And then in the second line, HaMisra, the second letter, is an open mem. And then we have Ula Shalom with the mem sofit. So just this snapshot is enough to give us a clear picture that this scribe was very competent in his writing between a normal mem, petucha, an open mem, and a closed mem, or a final mem, mem sofit. So if for those who haven't learned some Hebrew yet, this is a good place to start learning maybe some differences with the letters. So to wrap all that up, from Qumran, there is no such thing as a closed mem in the middle of this word lemarbe. It's not there. It, in my opinion, is considered one word. And
I see what you're saying. Now I see what you're saying. Okay, so there's no mem sofit in the middle of the word, is what you're saying.
Correct. And so ancient, and then I just have a little subsection here, ancient translation. So the Septuagint Megale, takes it from a noun.
One more point of clarification. We should have done this. We should have done this at the very beginning of this conversation, and I think I kind of did while you were getting your mic ready. But basically, the reason that this is important is because there is rabbinical teaching that says that because the mem in certain manuscripts, not in this one, as Rob has shown, but in certain manuscripts, there is a mem sofit in the middle of the word.
And that it has mystical significance.
Has mystical significance, and since it's closed, they say the womb of the Messiah will be closed too, and will either be. Wait a minute,
we're going to get there.
Okay,
because that's.
But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show people why we're focusing on this right now. Why does it matter? Why does it matter that whether it would be closed or not in the middle of a word? And the reason why is because this is going to inform us about what I was trying to talk about last week. Probably horribly done compared to what Rob's going to do. Okay, keep going now.
Okay, so and it's always wise. So you're kind of learning as we go here. You're learning kind of the basic, sketch of what my methodology is as a scholar, right? We want to account for the data, right? What's the data? And this is, of course, this is not exhaustive. I believe this is the only fragment we have from Isaiah from the Qumran scrolls. But if that cave 12 has in fact been discovered and it has text in it, we might have more Dead Sea Scroll text coming this year.
Very, very exciting.
So
for those who
so this is just, and plus I just draw from some of the rabbinic. This is just like reaching in and grabbing some of the core stuff out of the tradition. If we look at the ancient translations, the Septuagint has megale, hey megale, which is great, right? Greatness. It's just treated as a single word, translated as if it was a single word. The Peshitta uses an afel infinitive here, lemas gayo, gayu, properly.
Greater greatness.
Yeah, it means the same thing. So both the Aramaic Peshitta of Isaiah and the Septuagint treat this, whatever they were looking at in Hebrew, they just translate it with one word. The Targum, which is later, Sagi Revu, just is more like an amplified Bible. Much is the greatness. So Revu is the same Shoresh here as Marbe, Lemarbe, but they just say Sagi Revu. It would not, even though the Targum has two words here, it does not. It doesn't fit the idea of what the two words that we'll see in later rabbinic tradition as we move along. So that's basically it for what we call our ancient text witnesses. We have the fragment from Qumran, and then I have a couple of the other translations that are, pre-Islamic. The Septuagint is Second Temple. Peshitta Tanakh is probably maybe second century. I'm not talking about Peshitta New Testament. I'm talking about Peshitta Tanakh. Those are different animals. And then the Targum, which is a tradition that extends from the late Second Temple period into the rabbinic era. But it's very much in like an amplified Bible. The Targums are. Okay, so that's basically it. From there, the next thing we have to look at, if we say, okay, what else can I look at in terms of Jewish scribal practice with, pertaining to Isaiah chapter 9? And the earliest that we have, I believe, is the Aleppo Codex, which is from the Ben Asher scribal family. 930 Common Era. So this is what we call early 10th century. And you can see here that I've got the word underlined here, and it's in the middle of that section. So this is a Bible. The Aleppo Codex was originally an entire Hebrew Bible. Sadly, in some riots in Aleppo, Syria in the 40s, they destroyed a synagogue and they looted the place, and I think some of the text was destroyed and torn, pages torn out.
Well, they said it was a fire.
Yeah,
right?
and it could be that some took some of the pages and are storing them somewhere. But basically, you imagine a nice big book, and then the pages on the front, all the way almost through the whole book of Deuteronomy, is torn out, and then the book of Ezra and some other stuff at the end torn out. And then so we kind of, what's left more or less is what's all the stuff that's in the middle. And it's very well, I mean, this is zoomed in, or scanned at a pretty good resolution. You can see the detail and attention. Imagine a whole Hebrew Bible with this style. And what we have here is the core, basically the ideal Masoretic text. And here we have, now forget the vowels for a second. You see there's a shava, a patach, a shava, and a tzere here. And then there's the dagesh and the bet. And notice there's a little circule above the word. That circule is not a vowel point, but that is a flag to the reader to look to the right, to look at the marginal note.
Okay,
That's
hang on just a
Masoretic
second.
note.
What Rob's talking about in the Aleppo Codex picture here is he's underlined the word with red. What he's talking about right now is the dots underneath and that line underneath the word, and then the two little marks above one of the letters. And that's the key to the symbol to look into the marginal notes. Just for the people who don't know what the vowels are. Keep going. And when he said the dagesh inside of the bet, it's a little dot inside of one of the letters. It's the only dot inside of a letter in that underlined word. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, and so those who have done Hebrew will be able to follow this, much better. So but we have to start somewhere. We have to talk. So if this forces you to go back and do some homework, then that's fine. That's not a bad thing. But notice here, clearly we see lamed, and then what looks like a mem. And we know it looks just like a closed mem because we have the word shalom right before it, right? And then we can see the word ula shalom below it. So we have plenty of closed mems in the vicinity. We say this guy knew how to write. Obviously, he's very styled in his.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
script.
text.
Yeah. Now notice, but what this little circle is above, it's a little circle between the mem and the resh. You look to the side and it says lemarbe and then kuf, which means kri, read. So read it and notice it's clearly lamed, a mem petucha, an open mem, resh bet hey. Now again, notice the hey here. It looks the hey doesn't look too far different from the hey back at Qumran. So, we would be a little more strict probably today because and even in the hey in the main text, it looks almost like it could be a chet because of it touches the top cross part. But in any event, here's another thing. Notice El Gibur above to the top and to the right. El Gibur, would you think that's one or two words?
It looks like one word, but the
And how about Aviad in the middle of the top line?
Yeah, well, it looks like
Aviad.
El Gibor and Aviad all look like one
yeah,
word.
Exactly. So what's the point here is that spacing is not always, we got to be careful spacing. I would say that Aviad in the Aleppo Codex looks like one word, but when we compare it and you go back up and you look at the Aviad in the middle of the top line at 1Q Isaiah A, clearly two words. And then Sar HaShalom that we saw in Qumran, here we see Sar at the end of the line in the Aleppo Codex, and then just Shalom.
Okay, but what's the implication? What's the implication if it's one word or two words?
Qumran, it's the Prince of Peace.
Okay.
Sar HaShalom. The Aleppo Codex is Sar Shalom, Prince of Peace. I'm just saying that there's a difference here, and this is why. So which is true? Which is, one of them is the word of God and one is not. Well, that's not the way of thinking we have to bring to this. Our job now is we want to be good stewards of the texts that have been preserved, and we want to try to understand the copy habits of the scribes. We want it to the degree we can, like with Qumran. We want to try to understand the ideology, the theology, the ritual practices, of the community that preserved the Isaiah scroll and their sectarian writings. I mean, that's the era we're in right now, is we want to understand history. We want to understand our sources. And that's what we're doing here. So what we see by the year 930 is a preservation of this mem, lam, and then the resh bet hey. Now, whenever we have a Kari Ketiv, so here we have the Ketiv is Lamed Mem Sofit Resh Bet Hey. The Kare is in the margin.
Okay, explain what you mean by Kare.
It's what you're supposed to read when instead of what's actually written there. Now, in this case, the what you read is the same letters. But what the tradition is, as we'll see, is that the Masorite thought of this as two words. And so the vowels you see in the middle of the body of the text, the Shavah, Patach, Shavah, Tzere, are not the vowels for the letters you see in the main text, but the vowels for the letters in the margin with the letter Kuf underneath. That says Kuf means Kari, read. So, and what we'll see here is that when we look at other medieval Masoretic texts,
hang on just a sec. Let's slow down for a second. I mean,
okay.
This is extremely heady stuff, especially when you're trying to get it crossed in radio, right?
Yeah.
So for the person who doesn't know, so why would the scribe tell you to read something else?
Well, that's a really good question. And that's both my SBL papers so far have been on that kind of issue.
So I mean,
there's many different reasons, but here's a core fact. Here's a core fact. The Masoretes, so these are the scribes that were copying the Hebrew Bible in the 600s, 700s, 800s and beyond, here all the way into the 900s. Their view was they could not change a letter.
Yeah, they couldn't change the text.
They can't change the text. So in other words, the scribe here, Ben Asher, who's copying this codex here, what this means is that the Hebrew Bible, the Isaiah text that he's copying from, has a closed mem there, and
he can't change it.
He doesn't have the authority, and
even if he thinks it's a typo from the previous scribe, he's not going to change it because this is how he received it. He doesn't have the authority.
He would not dare to do that, right? So what they do, the Masoretes then, because of this kind of thing, they have their own oral tradition. But this is not Torah Shebaal Peh. It's a different.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
It has nothing to do with rabbis. It has nothing to do with halakha. It has to do with just how to preserve the text that we have. And then they accumulate a body of knowledge about the text, about the consonants. And that's what's written in the margin here, the Lemar Beh. He's saying read Lemar Beh. And what we'll see later in that this is part of a larger this is a flag to a larger category in Masoretic knowledge that classifies this as they write two words but read as one, and we're going to see that in the passage to come. So let's move on from the Aleppo. So go to page 2. Another 10th century Masoretic text here is classified as Sassoon 1053. Notice we have a similar thing. This time the words are in a different place. El Gibor, clearly two words. Aviad, one word. Sar Shalom, no hay. That's our top line. Then we have Le Marbe. There is a dog H there in the bed. It's just that this scan is not as high quality. And you can tell that the Sassoon 1053 is not at the same level of care and attention that the Aleppo Codex is, right? The writing's it's like he wrote it a little quicker. He wasn't being as careful. The lines aren't nice and square as they are with the Aleppo. But sure enough, we have in the same column, Le Marbe, and then the kuf with the dot above it, which means kri, read, Le Marbe. So basically, it looks just like the Aleppo, Lamed, Mem Sofit, Resh Bet Hey. So the difference between what we've seen now with the Aleppo and with the Sassoon 1053 is that where Qumran had the open mem, here we have two closed mems. Now we're going to go to one more, Leningrad Codex. Not even 100 years later. They date this one pretty precisely to the year 1008, so very early 11th century. And we see Sar Shalom, just like we did, and then we see Le Marbe, and we see the little circule. It's a closed mem right there, what I've underlined. And then it says Le Marbe Kri, read. Now, if you look at other Masoretic notes that are apart from these here, and that's what I have typed in here. The first one where I say Masoretic notes on the far right, Le Marbe Kuf with a little dot. It just means read Le Marbe. But there's a Masoretic note on this that says Chad min Chet, which Chet is 8, and then Kaf Tav dot means Katvin. Bet means 2. Vekarin, kar there. Kuf resh is short for.
You've totally lost me. I'm totally lost.
Are you okay? So I'm reading under the Masorah notes, underlined.
Yeah, but what does it all mean? I mean, you're just saying dots.
I'm translating.
Translate.
Well, the translation's right there in English. One of 8 occurrences where they write 2 words but read 1. So this is an Aramaic shorthand that the Masoretes used. 1 of 8. So Chad min means one from, or one of. Chet with a dot.
Yeah, but what does that even mean?
Means the number 8.
I mean,
it means
but
eight times. It means the Masoretes are like accountants. They're saying there are 8 times in Tanakh where the scribes write 2 words, but they read them as 1 word.
So okay, but let's step back for a second. So what's your what
Masoretic tradition says this is one of 8 times where there's 2 words read as if they were 1 word.
Okay, so let me see if I can dumb it down for people like myself. What you're saying is that in this passage in Isaiah 9:7, in the oldest manuscript that we have, which is the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have 2 words, and you have a what? You have a mem sofit, or you have an open mem.
In the Dead Sea Scrolls,
yeah,
it's an open. Yeah, it's. I'm going to scroll back up on for myself, so that we're talking about the very page 1, the upper left. Yeah. That's a regular mem. Le Marbe.
Okay. So then what you're saying,
it's treated as one word by the different translations we have also.
Okay. So then what you're saying is by the time we get to the 10th century, 11th century, they've
They've 10th, 11th.
They've closed it, and now they're making notes on it, right?
Well, yeah, and their note is that it's 2 words. but
Okay.
that are to be read as one. And so if you go back to the bottom of page 1 and you look at the Aleppo Codex, I could see how that could be interpreted as 2 words. I mean, look at the space between El Gibor and Aviad.
No, I get all that. I get all that. I'm trying to.
So they're saying the Lamed Mem is a word and Resh Bet Hey is a word. They're 2 words. So the closed Mem is appropriate because it's the end of a word, which opens up its own set of difficulties. But
okay, but at the same time, if it was all okay, now we're getting to the meat of the issue. If it was one word in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and now it's a closed mem, and they're saying it's 2 words
to be read as 1 word.
To be read as 1 word. Most likely, what was it? A scribal error, right? And they're just trying to explain it.
Well, yeah, exactly. But because they're bound to not change the text that
I get
they're
it.
copying from, yeah.
But
they're
now
also preserving the tradition that they put in the margin, which is just a regular. It looks like the Dead Sea Scroll spelling. It's just got a mem, an open mem, in the middle of the word.
Okay.
So the Masoretes have 2 things that they preserve. They preserve the main body of the text where there's 2 words with the mem sofit at the end of the first word, lam. And then in the margin, they're preserving what we find at Qumran, Lemarbe.
Basically, what I hear you saying is, yeah, Caleb, you were right in the beginning. It's probably a scribal error, right?
Yeah, I suppose. Well, we don't know. Here, the very last one.
But hang on just a sec. So basically,
Okay.
basically, it could have been a scribal error or whatever. But basically, the rabbis are going to defend it because it's the tradition that they receive, so they have to explain it somehow.
No,
So
wait a minute. These are not rabbis.
I'm sorry, the Masoretes. You're right.
These are
Thank you.
These are Sofrim.
Yeah. Okay.
Sofrim. They're not debating halakha. They're not in the Talmudic academy.
They don't care. They're saying
our job is to copy this scripture faithfully. Now, notice the bottom of page 2.
Hang on just a sec. The chat room. I need a Rob for Dummies version of this conversation. No doubt. I do too. Don't worry. Okay.
Okay.
So keep going. But I mean, basically, give me the rundown of what you're saying, because it seems like we're spending a whole lot of time on the same exact thing.
This is just the data.
Yeah, but the data's all the same. I mean,
yeah. So we have multiple witnesses.
Okay, but
so the last one on page 2, the Cairo Codex of the Prophets, which some date to 9th century, so 800s. Some put it a little later, so there's controversy. But it's clearly 2 words, I think. But Lamed Mem with a space and then Resh Bet Hey. So what we're doing is we're going through time, right? And we're looking at how things are changing. So we were kind of time traveling. We're
so wait, hang on just a second.
Period.
Okay, wait, hang on. But Lois brings up a great point in the chat room. When written as 2 words, does it change the meaning?
Well, all we have is
could it even be 2 words?
It could be. There's only been a suggestion that the scribal error, but it's just it's speculation because we don't know, that it was lamo, so that there was a lamed, a mem, a regular mem, and then a vav, rabbe. So it would be to him. It would just mean to him, and then it would be rabbe or rabbah hamisra. So it would basically have the same meaning, but it would be lamo or lo, like to him. And to him could be lamo or lo. But we don't have any that's a speculation, because we don't have a fragment that actually has that. So that's just trying to explain why would this be here. So the problem now that we have is, the medieval Jewish scribes are copying one thing in the middle of the text, and then their Kari tradition, their reading tradition, says just treat it as 1 word.
So Lois is
nothing
right.
Nothing to see here.
The only spelling that makes sense would be the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Correct. and the way the Septuagint translated and the way like the Peshitta Tanakh translates.
Okay, so look, I believe you on the data in terms of how it's changed throughout the years. I get that. What do the rabbis say?
Okay, so now let's move on. So that's all section 1, just the data. Now the scribes, remember that the scribes are not trying to interpret. They're not trying to give a drash, right? They're not.
What's a drash?
They're not giving a midrash. They're not
What's
saying.
What's a midrash?
They're not saying, oh, there's a mystical meaning here, right? Or they're not saying, oh, this ties to the halakha of whether or not.
Hang on just a sec. You are using words that I think a lot of people are not going to understand.
Okay, well.
What's a midrash? What's a drash? Okay. What's a halakha?
What we're going to do, we're going to shift now. We're going to see a midrash. So this is page 3.
Okay, but hang on. What is a midrash, though? You got to define what a midrash is.
A midrash is a rabbinic teaching, usually a moral kind of lesson, or a legal a legal argument tied to a scriptural text. So a midrash is something that is where you have a rabbi who takes a snippet of scripture, maybe a word or two, or a whole line, and then maybe another verse from the Bible somewhere else, and then ties them together in communication of a larger moral principle or legal principle.
Okay, go for it.
So that's called midrash. So, well, I just looked. The Jerusalem, where it says Y San, that's Yerushalmi Sanhedrin. So, and in Vaikra Rabbah. So these are both rabbinic sources that cite Isaiah 9:6, but that make no mention of a closed mem. So we have, some of the rabbinic sources don't mention a closed mem, and the Jerusalem Talmud, you'd think, wow, they don't mention it. So now, do they don't mention it because they can't say everything and they just didn't talk about it, or that they didn't really have a closed mem in their Isaiah scrolls?
So wait, hang on just a sec. What I'm seeing from this basically is that they're not even talking about it.
Right. They cite the verse, but they just use.
But they Ruth Rabbah, Rashi, Yosef Kara, Avraham ibn Ezra. They don't even talk about it.
Yeah, you're on page 4. I'm on page 3.
Well, yeah, but it seems like they don't say anything about it. So why even?
Because the Talmud is early. Page 2, the Babylonian Talmud's earlier than all those guys.
Okay.
So listen to this is I've kind of adapted this Encino English translation of where it says B San 94a. This is on page 2, or page 3 rather, section 2. So the Babylonian Talmud is, this is in Mesopotamia. This is pre-Islam, right? So this is like 4th, 5th, 6th century. And this is most of this text is in Aramaic. Some of it's in Hebrew. But it starts off, they quote Isaiah 9:6. Lemarbe, right, of the increase of his government and peace there shall be ein kates, no end. And then it says, Rabbi Tanhum said, Bar Kapara expounded in Sepphoris, why is every mem in the middle of a word patuach, open, whilst this is satum, is closed? So this is the conversation going on here in the Talmud is earlier than the Aleppo Codex, right? This conversation is happening a couple centuries.
So in other words, I get where you're going with this. So in other words, we know that it's closed at this point.
Well, at least in Babylonia, in the Babylonian scribal tradition, not necessarily in the Yerushalmi, in the land of Israel scribes, is it closed? We just don't know. And then, so the story. This is a midrash. It's a rabbinic story based on kind of stretching and imagining a moral lesson here around a biblical text. The Holy One, blessed be He, wished to appoint Hezekiah as Mashiach. This is what the rabbis are saying in Babylonia here. And he wanted to appoint Sennacherib as Gog and Magog. But the Midat Hadin, the attribute of justice, which is one of God's attributes, said to the Holy One, blessed be He, Rabbono Shel Olam, which is sovereign of the world, if you didn't make David the Messiah, who uttered so many hymns and psalms before thee, wilt thou appoint Hezekiah as such, that is to be Messiah, who did not sing hymns to thee in spite of all the miracles that you did for him? So in other words, what the rabbis are saying is that Hezekiah, they're trying to explain why is this mem closed that they see in Babylon. So let's just put year 400 or something, like 400 or 500.
Well, you
5th
think
century.
the Babylonian Talmud was in the 400s?
Yeah, sure.
No.
It's edited, it's redacted.
No. I totally disagree with that.
Okay. Okay. What do you want to do here? You want to go to a footnote, or do you want to keep talking?
No. I'm just. I mean, it's a good question. The Babylonian Talmud.
It was not redacted until later. I'm just saying ballpark. Just put year 500. If you want to put year 600, fine.
Okay.
That's neither here nor there. It's pre-Islamic. Now we don't want to get into that. This is just for now. So, but what's going on there? The rabbis they're having this conversation. They're saying, we see a closed mem. Why is it closed mem? And so they have this tradition of Bar Kapara back in Sepphoris. So they're hearing, they say this person who's from the Holy Land, even though they're in Babylon, told this tradition that the Holy One, blessed be He, at the time of Hezekiah, wanted to make him Messiah. But the justice, as a personified entity, Midat Hadin, an attribute of justice, says, wait, God, wait, O Holy One, you didn't even make David the Messiah. And he made all these psalms and songs, and Hezekiah hasn't done anything, and you're going to make him Messiah? And therefore the mem was closed. So that God closed the mem this is a midrash here, according to this story, because he listened to the measure of the Midat Hadin, the attribute of justice, saying it's not just for you to make Hezekiah Messiah, because you didn't make David Messiah. That's why it became Satum, it became closed. But then right away the earth exclaims. So now the earth opens up its mouth, so to speak, and says, Rabbono Shel Olam, sovereign of the universe, let me utter a song before you instead of this tzaddik, this Hezekiah, and then you can make him the Messiah. In other words, the earth wants the Messiah to come, so the earth is going to cry out and sing a song. And then so the earth starts singing, and as it is written, and then it quotes Isaiah 24, from the uttermost parts of the earth we have heard songs, even glory la tzaddik, to the tzaddik. So the rabbis are saying this is the earth singing praises to God, to the glory of Hezekiah. You should make him the Messiah and bring redemption.
So is there any place at all where the rabbis do say that this closed mem?
You've got to be patient, my friend.
Well, you're going really slow, man. I'm sorry.
Well,
it's like molasses.
We're teaching the text. Well, okay. Well, we don't have to take this pace. But this is what it is. If you want to understand how this tradition developed, there's no other way to it. You got to trudge through the weeds.
Okay,
I'll tell you what.
No, keep going.
I'll pick up.
Wait, I want you to keep going with Rashi. What is Rashi saying?
I'll pick up the pace. I'll pick up the pace a little bit.
Well, you only got about what? We only got.
We've got till about 15 after, or I could go a little later than that even today. I got a card at it.
Okay, keep going.
So
what does Rashi
in a
say?
nutshell, the Babylonian Talmud says there is a closed mem there. It's in the middle of the word, and here's why. Here's the story of why that mem got closed. It was because God had a secret. That's where it says, it's my secret, why he closed it. And it's a word play on razili, which means I am wasting away in Isaiah 26.
So this is let me see if I understand. This is the first time within rabbinic literature or within really anything that we see of someone speaking to the mem being closed and giving some reason whatsoever, whether it's whether it's nonsense or not, they're giving some reason why.
The Sofrim, the scribes say it's 2 words, read it as one, right? Because they're just practical. They're like accountants. They're 2 words, read them as one.
And the Sofrim are the people who are writing down the text.
Right. The rabbis are like, the rabbis depend upon the scribes. The scribes don't depend on the rabbis.
Sure.
So the rabbis are just like, oh, it's one word. They think it's 1 word, and they stop listening to the scribe who's saying time out, it's 2 words. They're like, no, this is what happened, and their imagination takes off, and it's a sealed mystery.
So now,
right?
so you got these guys who are writing it. It's like politics almost. You got these guys who are writing it down, right? And the rabbis are like, well, it should say this, and the scribes are like, no, we're not changing it. This is how we received it. We're not changing it. If you want to, you got to deal with it the way it is. And so then the rabbis are like, okay. We'll deal with it the way it is. It's a closed mem. Now, this is why.
Which means the rabbis are saying, no, it's 1 word. See, right? We have a disagreement. The Masoretes tradition is that it's 2 words. The rabbis in Babylon are saying it's 1 word. So this is the difference. This is why Yeshua says scribes and Pharisees, right? We need, there's something that we learn from each side. That's a whole issue there. But anyway, so this is the rabbinic imagination gone wild. Rashi, remember, he's later on, but he's in the 11th century in France. He writes a commentary on the Babylonian Talmud. So even if, Caleb, you want to say that the Talmud was not written yet in the 5th, 6th century, that's fine. Whatever the oral tradition, whatever the memorized sugyot, etc., the body of the Talmud, by the time we get to Rashi,
sure,
it's in writing. It's writing. It's all written, and he's actually writing a commentary on a written text. He's not interacting with an oral text.
And honestly, I know, just back to this real quick, back to Lois's question. This is a great point that Rob's just made. In other words, from the time that you have, up until Rashi, how long would it have taken for? Remember, creating books was not like going to the printer and saying, I want a book printed. These people had to handwrite all of it. If you wanted a copy, it was expensive. It often took years to get the entire copy. So how long would it have taken for the Talmud to be standardized until by the time Rashi gets there? And we're talking hundreds of years. So I agree with you on that.
Not only that, Caleb, to throw another difficulty or monkey wrench into that picture is that you have migration of Jewish communities now from Babylonia, from Babylonia, what we have the rise of Islam, right? Then we have the Jewish diaspora in North Africa and in France, and not to mention we still have communities of Jews living in Eretz Yisrael, and they have their own Talmud. And so you have, by Rashi's time, Rashi basically has to decide, am I going to write a commentary on the Babylonian Talmud or the Jerusalem Talmud? And he goes with the Babylonian Talmud because he believed it was the authoritative legal text for his religion. And so this is all wrapped into this. So what does he write? So so notice this is Rashi on this page, on Daf 94a, on this page. He writes, and in Hebrew here, it's mem. See the mem? I'm towards the bottom of page 3 there. It's a mem with the 2 little dashes, mem, letter mem. And he's talking about the mem that we saw that is mentioned here. The mem that is satum, is closed. And then his comment here is shevitivat lemarbe hamisra satum, that the word, that in the word, Betivat lemarbe hamisra, that the word satum, that the mem, which is in the word, is satum, is closed, and therefore lechach nistam, it is It is closed up. That is to say, and then he says, Nistemu hadvarim sha'alu b'machshava lo na'aseh. What that means is that words that arise up in God's thoughts, that's what machshava is. Words that, or things, hadvarim, that rise up in God's thoughts are velo na'aseh, but are not acted upon. So the picture is when God has a thought in his heart, but he doesn't act on it. Those are called nistemu. They're closed up. So the picture here that Rashi is doing, now again, this is 11th century. He's saying this is like God's thinking something.
Peter says like Nineveh.
Yeah, God's thinking something, but it's not coming out into the world. Okay, and then he says lishana achrana, which means in other language, or another way to think about it is shebikesh hakadosh baruch hu. So the Holy One sought to listom tzrotein shel Yisrael, to close up, to stop Israel's enemies, who sought to make him Messiah. So, in other words, that somehow Rashi's thinking that Israel's enemies also wanted to make Hezekiah Messiah, but God closed them up. He stopped somehow he put a stop to the making of Hezekiah as Messiah, and so he kind of just reiterates the Talmud midrash that we just read. But then he says, "Mori Rabbi Piresh," so my teacher and rabbi interpreted, "Lefei shenistam piv shel Hezekiah velo amar shira," that it got closed up because God closed up nistam piv, he closed up Hezekiah's mouth, and he did not utter a song. So Rashi's teacher, and I don't remember who that is, but Rashi puts a note here after he quotes what he explains the Talmud. He says, "Well, my own teacher told me this is because the closed mem is because God closed Hezekiah's mouth so that he would not utter any songs, so that God prevented Hezekiah from becoming Messiah, from being greater than David." Basically, in other words, the idea that here we have 11th century France, Rashi's reading the Talmud, and his view is the closed mem is there, and the meaning of it has to do with God preventing Hezekiah from being Messiah, that he had the potential to be, but he was held back.
Got it. Okay, so
that's all it is at this point. Nothing about virgin birth, nothing about, there is, obviously it's tied to the concept of Messiah and the withholding of Messiah coming. That's what we can say here at this point. The last note I have there on page 3 is just from Ruth Rabbah, which is a post Talmudic, but it's wrong. It says lemar bey written chaser mem, lacking a mem, and that's not even true. It has a mem. So we see that even in the rabbinic midrash tradition, they get stories, and stories are told about a text, and they're not even going back to actually look at the actual text of Isaiah.
Yeah, they're just repeating.
It becomes what do they call telephone?
Yeah.
Oh yes, something about a mem at this verse. Yeah, that it's not there. So just another. And then there's another. I didn't put it on here. There's another medieval midrash that teaches the closed mem is in HaMisra, the word for government. So it's Lemar HaMisra. And there's one medieval text that says the closed mem is in the word HaMisra, which is not even true. It's so you see how that's what happens when you have Pharisees without scribes.
Yeah.
Right? It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's no check at all. Okay. I want to pause there because we're at, I can go for a little bit longer, but I know this is a lot, and I love it because this is what I love. This is the kind of stuff that I.
So, well, what I'm seeing in your notes is that Rashi, Yosef Kara, Avraham ibn Ezra essentially don't.
Exactly. It doesn't. Now, these are the guys that would, because the reason I chose these guys, Rashi and Yosef Kara. Now, this is not Yosef Karo. This is not 16th century, 17th century Sfad Kabbalist, Joseph Caro, author of the Shulchan Aruch. This is a Yosef Kara. He's a contemporary with Rashi. These guys they paid attention a bit to the Masoretic tradition. Rashi does not give a comment on his comment. So Rashi writes a commentary on Isaiah, as does Yosef Kara. But they do not talk about, in their commentary on Isaiah, they talk about this passage, but they make no mention there of the closed mem.
Yeah.
One thing someone did Rashi write first? Did he write his commentary on Isaiah before he wrote his commentary on Sanhedrin, or other way around? Maybe when it's possible that Rashi wrote his commentary on Isaiah at a time when he wasn't aware of this closed mem tradition. And so that when he did write his commentary on the Babylonian Talmud, that he did include it. So there's things that I don't know. I'm not claiming to know it, but this is we build our knowledge. Yosef Kara, in his commentary on the Torah, he does mention Masoretic tradition quite a bit, and he has knowledge. So the fact that he, in his commentary on Isaiah, makes no mention of this is something that's okay.
It's weird.
It's someone you would look at. You would say, what does Yosef Kara say? Now we get to 12th century Spain. This is Avraham ibn Ezra, who was fluent in Arabic, right? He interacted with. Because this is Islamic Spain, really. He interacted with Muslims a lot. And he's an astrologer. He believes in astrology. He believes in all these kind of things. But this is in his commentary on Isaiah 9:6. He says, Derek Darash HaSofrim, which means the way of the interpretation of the scribes, Ki Hamem Sagur, which means the mem is closed. Ki mem Sagur betoch hamilah. Betoch means in the middle of, hamilah is the word. So the mem is, according to the teaching of the scribes, so he calls them sofrim, which is right. The mem is closed in the middle of the word, v'haya ra'ui lichiot besof, when it would be appropriate to be besof, at the end. In other words, the mem is in the middle of the word closed when it's really appropriate for it to be closed at the end.
Yeah.
And then what does he say? He says remez. Remez means this is a hint. Remez laot hashemesh sheshav hatzel la'achor, which means this is a hint to the sign of the sun. Remember, shemesh is sun. Sheshav hatzel, whose shadow returned backwards. And then he says, Re'eh, see Isaiah Lach Chet, which means 38:8. So Ibn Ezra says this is like in Isaiah 38, where the sun goes back and the shadow moves back up the stairs. He says the mem at the end of the word went back. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
He says it's just a hint to later in Isaiah of the sun going back.
Interesting.
So he's saying that basically the mem went backwards and now is in the middle, and it's just all it is a sign to what's coming in Isaiah. Because remember, it's still in Isaiah. Isaiah 9,
Sure.
You're going to learn in Isaiah about this miracle of the sun going backwards. And I think he's probably sees the M kind of not like a perfect circle, but it's as we'll see later in the Kabbalah on the last page, it's taken to be a ring. So it could be that, but nothing about the Messiah, nothing about Hezekiah, nothing about a virgin. And he just throws this miracle of the sun going backwards. That's it.
Okay, keep going.
And he's someone who would also be kind of, you'd expect to be in the know. Why doesn't he quote the Talmud here? He's. I don't think he's interested in the Babylonian Talmud at this point, Ibn Ezra. Then we have another medieval scribe, or not scribe, rather, commentator, who they think is a disciple of Rashbam, who was Rashi's grandson. So this could be, 4 generations or 3 or 4 generations past Rashi, 12th century. He mentions it in his commentary on Isaiah. He says there's a closed mem here, but then that's all he says. And then he just goes on and interprets it as if it's one word. So here's a handful of medieval commentators, Parshanim, that really don't seem
they don't even touch on it.
with what was going on in the Talmud, except we do see Rashi in his commentary on the Talmud does get into it. Then we have, now all of a sudden we have a different emerging idea
Yeah,
here.
David Kimchi.
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 It's
I'm
I
playing.
know kimchi. My wife makes kimchi. Yeah.
Keep going.
David Kimchi in southern France. So he's 12th, 13th century. And he writes a commentary. He's immersed in Masorah much more than Rashi or the commentators before him. He's a person that's really, he's got some resources in Masorah notes. And he says, Hamem Sutuma Bekatuv, which means the mem is, he treats it as feminine, Satuma, instead of Satum, but it means the mem is closed Bekatuv, which means in writing, in the scriptures. Then it says, Bekari Bemem Petucha, but read it with an open mem. So he's basically reiterating what we see in the
Masoretes. Yeah.
Masoret thing. Even though he uses different language, the Masoretes say, one of 8 times where it's 2 words, read it as one. Or they just said, put lemarbe, read it lemarbe. He puts it in his own words. And then he says, this is the opposite. Behefek ze be'ezra. This is the opposite of in Ezra. Heim prutzim. And when he says Ezra, he means Nehemiah. So remember, in the medieval time, Ezra and Nehemiah is one book.
Yeah.
And there's a side note. It's always the last book in the Tanakh.
Interesting.
So we're late Jewish tradition, we put Chronicles, but in our Aleppo Codex, in our Leningrad Codex, all the scribes put Nehemiah, Ezra Nehemiah at the end, but it's called Ezra. This is the opposite of in Ezra, where you have Heim Prutzim, where the scribes say it's 2 words, but read it as one. So if you notice here, I put Sassoon 1053 and Leningrad Codex. Sadly, we don't have the Aleppo Codex. We don't have for this passage. Otherwise, I'd have it here. So what you see here is Heim Prutzim. You have an open mem. What they're saying is at the end of a word. So Heim Prutzim, and then now in the Leningrad Codex, you can't really see the space, but look, they all run together in the Leningrad. It looks like almost no space. Yerushalayim, Asher, Ham, right? Heim Prutzim. But it's talking about the walls of Jerusalem, which are broken down. They're Prutzim from Peretz, which means to breach or broken down. So Rabbi Kimchi here in the 12th, 13th century is saying that this is what we see here in Isaiah is the opposite of what we see in Ezra, which is Nehemiah 2:13, where we see an open mem at the end of Heim Prutzim. And he says, Hamem Pitucha Besof HaTeva. We have an open mem at the end of the word, Bekatuv, in writing. V'yesh bo drash. And there is a teaching for it. And he says, Ka'asher yistemu chomot Yerushalayim, for as just as the walls of Jerusalem will be closed up, shehem prutzim kol zaman hagalut, that are broken down throughout the diaspora, or throughout the galut, which means the dispersion. The galut is the galut means diaspora. Galut in the rabbinic mind means the temple's destroyed, there is no priesthood, and Jews are all over the land. And so the walls of Jerusalem are prutzim, are broken down throughout the whole time of Galut.
Okay, hang on just a sec. Now, look, we're coming to the end of this show because I know that you have to leave. You got a lot left here. We can come back to this, and you can show us your Peter makes a good point. You can show us the reason and the proof, but what's the point of all of it?
Okay, so let's just finish. We'll just finish with David Kimchi then. What he's saying is at the end here, le'et ha'yeshua, at the time of salvation, yistemu ha'prutzim, that which is broken down will be sealed up. Va'az tiftach ha'misra, and the government will open shehi setuma, that which is closed, al yedei melech HaMashiach, by the means of the King Messiah. So David Kimchi Rashi's already dead. Rashi's been dead. When David Kimchi was born in 1160, Rashi was born 1040. So we're talking 120-year difference here. He's taking it not as the Talmud talks about it, pertaining to the prevention of Hezekiah becoming Messiah, anointed as Messiah by God. He's not taking it as Ibn Ezra did, who was, roughly 100 years prior. He was 7. Kimchi was 7 when Ibn Ezra died. He's not taking it about the son going back. But he's still holding on to this idea that has to do with Messiah, and he ties it in with the closed mem of Lemar Bey is associated with the open mem that he sees in the Masorah, Haim Prutzim, of the walls being broken down. And he says that the walls of Jerusalem will remain broken down as long as there's exile, Hagalut, exile, that was the word, it's diaspora, but exile. But at the time of salvation, that which is broken down will be stopped up. He uses the word setam there, yistamu haprutzim. That which is broken down shall be brought up, and then the government will open that which is closed. So the idea is that this mem will become opened, I guess, and this is going to happen through the Al Yadei Melech HaMashiach, by means of, at the hands of the King Messiah. So that we can pause there.
Well, I still want to know what your point is. I mean, even if we come back to it and okay, finish your proof and your reason, I want to know what the point is.
The point is that this tradition has multiple facets. The Midrash, these are each what we've seen here. It's ordering the information. We have the scribal world doing one thing, 2 words, but we're reading them as one. Then you have the world of the Babylonian Talmud. Oh, it's one word, and it's a secret reason, and it's because they were going to make Hezekiah Messiah, but God prevented it and kept his mouth, prevented it for whatever reason, for his own reasons. Rashi comes along a couple hundred years later and explains, it has to do with Hezekiah and not uttering a song, etc. But most of these medieval commentators aren't saying anything about it. So it's not a widespread tradition. It's not a real powerful tradition. What you do is we have the seed of it, and you see it growing and giving different kinds of expression in different places. Ibn Ezra in the 11th, 12th century says nothing about the Messiah. He says something about the son going back. But only with David Kimchi in the 13th century do we see it really strong messianic tone. He's really engaged with the Masoretic tradition, and he sees it associated with the walls of Jerusalem being broken down versus being stopped up.
But we still have no. So let me see if I understand.
Nothing about a virgin birth.
Okay. So the point is that we have strong association in Isaiah 9:7 with the Messiah himself, right? Throughout the tradition.
Exactly. And what I didn't put here is what we have from the Gospel of Matthew. Unto us a son is born. His name shall be Emmanuel, right? His government shall be upon his shoulders. Now, not all that's in Matthew 1. But the idea is that the virgin will give birth is the oldest Jewish tradition we have pertaining to this passage. I don't have it on here because we're just looking at rabbinic world. But the oldest tradition in the background of this are Christians, whether they're Jew or Gentile, behind all of the texts we've looked at. Maybe except for the Qumran group, if that Isaiah scroll is before if that's first century BC, are saying. But even then, the Greek tradition of Parthenos goes back to maybe 200 BC. So this idea of virgin conceiving, Emmanuel, and then the government shall be on his shoulders. All these things. Now I know I'm conflating Isaiah 7 with Isaiah 9 here. But they are taken together in our tradition pertaining to Yeshua. And that's in the background here. And that's where we see it, and we can pick it up next week if we want to continue this with Yosef Kaspi, who comes 100 years now later than Kimchi, and he's really now saying it does not mean virgin. Now, Cosby, this is the last citation on page 4. It's an extended, I read his whole bit, but I didn't want to translate the whole thing. And I'm typing all this in. I don't want to type all this in. But he basically says, this is him, and he's in the 14th century. He's saying, he calls Hebrew Yehudit. He doesn't call it Ivrit. He calls it Yehudit. It's better than Aravit, which is Arabic. It's better than Yavan, Greek, all other languages. Ha'alma does not mean the virgin. And he says the closed mem does not mean virgin. So someone in his life, somewhere,
said told him.
Someone's telling him. Yeah. And now, and to all listening, if we can find this would be gold, for building this this knowledge here, is to find a source prior to Yosef Cosby. Coming after isn't going to help. We want a source earlier than Cosby, and it doesn't have to be. It could be a Christian who's arguing with a Jew, but who is teaching that the closed mem is the closed womb. Yeah. All we have is Yosef Cosby saying that's not what it means. So that means someone got under him. Someone prodded him with that. And what does he say? This is his argument. The great Sanhedrin put the closed mem there so that Jews who know the vowel points and the accents and the Kri Ketiv would be aware of like false teachings that would come along, and that they would in other words, he argues that the Great Sanhedrin, which is a rabbinic imagined thing, at the beginning of the Second Temple era after the Babylonian exile, they put that closed mem in there to keep us on guard against the false teaching that someone would come around and say that it has to do with the virgin. Because he says it does. He uses the word virgo in Latin. It does not mean Virgo. It does not mean virgin. So the oral tradition of the Kri Ketiv and the vowel points help protect Jews from apostasy. That's kind of his theme there. So let's pause there. If we want to, next week we can do the real imaginative stuff. If you thought any of that is imaginative, the stuff from the Kabbalah is even more so.
We still have, so we're still in the middle. This is all for those listening. This is all a rabbit trail off of this article by Aish.com, which we need to get back to at some point too. Next in this article is the suffering servant in Isaiah 53, which this rabbi is going to tell us has nothing to do with the Messiah. However, I think he's certainly wrong. So if next week Rob and I will talk about it, we can jump in somewhere. Anyway, we hope that you will come back and join us as we continue to look through this article. Is there anything else you wanted to say about this before we take off?
No, John says check out Sefer Yetzirah and Sefer HaBahir, which I didn't. That's a good point. For traditions prior to Cosby that would have a closed mem being a womb. Mm-hmm. So John says check out Sefer Yetzirah 3 and Sefer HaBahir 85. Eitz Chaim's later, so that's not going to help, but it would show at least the continuation of that tradition. So thanks, John. Maybe you could email those to me if you have them. I don't know where I have those somewhere on my computer. Cool.
All right, guys. Well, hey, we will be back next week, and we will continue. At some point, we'll get to the suffering servant, and there's a lot more that we got to talk about. Thank you to Rob for putting together such an in-depth study of Isaiah 9:7 and the different nuances that we see within rabbinic tradition and also within history. And I think the point that you made about the Gospels being the earliest Jewish text that we have of this, relating it to a virgin, is probably one of the best points that I think I heard that really struck home to me, I think. But no matter what we can say is that our Messiah was born of a virgin, and that does one thing. It shows us that he is to be glorified. We're supposed to glorify our great God and Savior, Yeshua, the Messiah.